Hey everyone, Warwick's here. Happy patch 11.1. We're here with our third and final monk guide, Windwalker Monk. As always, I do these in alphabetical order, so Windwalker is always the last guide to go out. Um, so just a quick note about the guide videos and how I look at them and how I make them is that I target a lot of my guides towards folks that are trying Windwalker for the first time or maybe haven't been playing it for that long and are just trying to gain themselves a foundation. There's a lot of advanced tips and tricks that you can use for Windwalker Monk that are going to target, more advanced players and things like that. Small little talent changes that can lead to big impact on things like more fully developed AoE or more fully developed single target. But the situation that I find myself in is I like to try and help make these specs a little less scary to play. So I make my stuff much more aimed at a level of player where you're just learning the spec, where you're still finding your footing with the spec. So if you're a player that's been playing Windwalker for years, you may not get a ton out of this video. There may still be things that are hopefully helpful, so definitely click through. I'll try to chapter out all this stuff at the below it items. So if you're looking for something specific, you can check that out. But I just want to give that warning up front. So what I discuss in my guides, we're going to talk about your talent builds. That's usually the thing that takes the longest because I like to kind of talk about the specifics and why things have changed. We're going to include hero talent, obviously, in that discussion as well. We'll talk about your stats. We'll talk about your best in slot gear, mostly in the trinket and weapon territory. And some crafted items that you could potentially go target. And then we'll talk about your consumables, enchants, things like that. And then we'll do like a quick overview of the rotation. Now, I did do the Monk Academy series, and for Windwalker Monk, a lot, and I would say almost everything. I have to go back and watch it again. But almost everything that I talk about in the rotation guide of the Windwalker Monk section of the Academy still valid. So if you want to get really in depth with the rotation, definitely go check out that video. And editor version of me hasn't already thrown that up in the corner. He will. He will. Sorry, that's me threatening me. So that you can go check that out. But we'll do like a quick overview on it, just so that you have some strong ideas about what to be looking at. So let's dive into it. Let's start with your talent builds, and we'll start with a raid build. So the good thing about the monk class tree is that you have a lot of flexibility in what you can pick. There are some very key core talents that I think you have to go grab. Obviously, Fast Feet, Tiger's Lust, Grace of the Crane, Calming Presence, Transcendence, just because it's very, very useful. We'll talk about this in just a second, but obviously this, Vigorous Expulsion, a little less valuable, but it does open up paths down the tree. Fort Brew, and then something like Chi Proficiency, because you do some nature damage here, and then Martial Instincts, and then the 2 Touch of Death talents, obviously big damage output. But beyond that, a lot of your other stuff is kind of like pick and choose what you want for flavor, and that's one of the reasons why I love the monk class tree as it is. And then the spec tree, a few things have changed, and there are some things that will still change depending on gearing and things like that. Like the Windwalker setup is gonna change quite a bit, and obviously you can see playing a different hero talent. So let's talk about the class tree side. I think the biggest flex points here are going to be Dance of the Wind. If you're not getting directly targeted by something, this may or may not work, so it's going to vary quite a bit. What do you grab? If you want to get rid of Dance of the Wind, you can grab something like Bounce Back, which gives you a slight DR. And then Healing Winds potentially there. If there's some really, really good Transcendence tech that you can use, this just gives you some safety in healing. Yes, it could probably overheal quite a bit, but at the very least, it adds that layer of safety. Other ones, depending on, because I know there's a lot of ad fights, you could potentially grab Peace and Prosperity as well. Give you Ring of Peace, which is going to give you a little bit more control over those ads as they pop out, assuming they are affected by Ring of Peace. And then you can grab little things like Celestial Determination if there's a fight with a slow. When you have Juan out, obviously you're going to not be slowed quite enough. So some value in that, but it's obviously very, very fight dependent. Over in the class tree, there are a couple of changes that we want to be looking into. So in Season 1, we were playing a lot of Tiger Palm, Touch of the Tiger type damage. Now, obviously, we're grabbing Hardened Souls. But now we're coming down this side of the quote-unquote AoE side a lot more often. And there's some particular reasons for that. Dance of Chi-Ji is still very, very good. And because of the way that the tier set works and consuming things like Blackout Kick, things like Energy Burst find a lot more value. Sequence Strikes brings a lot of value as a result. And even something like Last Emperor's Capacitor has some potential. Not so much in single target type setups, but with the way the raid is, where there's ads that are popping out quite a bit, whether they're stacked or spread, it depends. But if they're stacked, like Last Emperor's Capacitor, along with Power of the Thunder King, potentially means that you could find your way into using Sith Lightning as a Windwalker. Slicing Winds is a new talent, replaces Flying Serpent Kick. I don't think there's a lot of value in it. The damage is like okay, but trading out excellent mobility and what Flying Serpent Kick does for just a little bit more damage on a 30-second cooldown, whereas Flying Serpent Kick I think is also 30-second cooldown. So like you're not trading for a cooldown, but you have to empower to get the distance, which if you're trying to get out of a mechanic quickly, not a lot of value there. I think Slicing Winds is probably going to see a lot more play in PvP than it will in PvE. But that said, mess around with it if you want. Alright. Beyond that, the build pretty much doesn't change. You're using a lot of the same talents. Expel Harm through Combat Wisdom is still there. You're still grabbing a Momentum boost, obviously, because haste is so damn valuable. Now, if you're dual wielding, Dual Threat is still going to be really, really good. And we'll talk more about the dual wielding set, when dual wielding versus two-handed discussion, when we get into gear. But for this, know that if you're dual wielding, Dual Threat still has a lot of value. Now, if you're not dual wielding, you can go grab something like Last Emperor's Capacitor and then pull a point out of Fury of Zhuen to go grab Power of the Thunder King if you want to play the Sith Lightning build. But if you don't want to do that and you still are not dual wielding, then putting it into Zhuen's Bond is, you know, valuable. More Zhuens is never a bad thing. So, but beyond that, you know, you're no longer playing Brawler's Intensity. In single target, there's still a lot of value in Thunder Fist, although there's been some wonkiness with Strike of the Windlord's AoE scaling. But in most single target fights, or even two targets, like this is still pretty valuable. In AoE, we'll see that it's a different story. We're no longer playing Inner Peace, which means Tiger Palm costs the full 60 energy now. And then we're not playing Shadow Boxing Treads, obviously, in more single target oriented builds. Those are the fight that has consistent two target cleave. You can definitely do that setup here, where you play this, and instead of playing like Energy Burst into Sequence Strikes, you can grab Shadow Boxing Treads into Rising Star in order to get down here to Whirling Dragon Punch. And finally, Whirling Dragon Punch, you notice we're not playing Knowledge of the Broken Temple, and that's just because of the way the raid is structured. There's one single target fight, that's Sprocketmonger, where obviously you're going to want to play this, but because there's a lot of ads set up on other fights, and because of the combination of getting the Blackout Kick proc, and then you get free chi generation off of that, Revolving Wind has a lot more value just because of fight design and because of tier set design. So, see there. Now, here are talents. As you can see, Condo the Celestial. So, Condo the Celestial started to peek its head into the mix a little bit towards the end of Season 1. I was running sims where it was like a 0.3% damage difference between it and Shadowpan, and I love Condo the Celestials personally, so I'm thrilled to be playing it. Integrates more burst AoE, so it's a cooldown that you can use again in the fight when ads come out. Save your Condo the Celestials for when those ads come out. Heavy burst on all of them. And because of Unity Within, when you recast it or you just use it during the channel, you proc all of them. Now, Courage of the White Tiger is the big one, because it just does like big AoE damage. But even something like Flight of the Red Crane gives you small energy regeneration, but also gives that physical damage out there. And then here, again, stomping your targets. I mean, 3 of your Celestials do pure damage, and then this gives you like a big time cooldown reduction. So like, there's just a lot of value out of the Celestials. Defensively, it's kind of picked up. Obviously, Jade Sanctuary, very good. You'd heal a little bit for it. Fist of Fury and doing more damage, just generally speaking, is very good. And with Fist of Fury being a big part of our rotation, Temple Training is good. And then Restore Balance, you gain Rushing Jade Wind while Xuen is active. Now, it's not something that you talent here, but you do gain it whether or not you have it talented or not. And so you just gain a little bit more just free damage, basically. So, like, it's a very, very, very good tree. Defensively, not necessarily as powerful as Shadowpan is, but still there. Shadowpan, unfortunately, has just kind of fallen off. It's still pretty consistent damage. You can still play it if you really, really want. It is better defensively through things like Wisdom of the Wall, against all odds, or excuse me, not against all odds, Predictive Training, and Protect and Serve. Like, it does have a better defensive toolkit, but Condo of the Celestials, from a damage standpoint, it's much better. It's just better. It's like, I think it's something like 4 or 5% ahead for me right now. Like, that's significant. So, but that's the raid build. Mythic Plus build, again, some small changes have happened here, and some tweaks and things like that you can play around with. Obviously, in the class tree, grab whatever utility you need. Over here, things like, again, Last Emperor's Capacitor and things like that, you can switch out Dual Threat and Fury of Xuen in order to get that, or even Xuen's Bond in order to pick these up. But right now, because I'm dual wielding, Dual Threat just has more value, so grabbing the Sith Lightning build, which I will do eventually, but just not right now, simply because the value isn't there at this moment, because I've got dual wielding. One thing you will notice is that Thunder Fist is not taken in the AoE build, and that's because, like, it does really, really weird things against multiple targets. Now, Gale Force, still very good. Communion with Wind, still very good, because it hits the normal one, and like this hits in a cone in front of you. But this right here doesn't gain a lot of value. So this is where, again, this point was traded out in order to grab things like Sequence Strikes and Energy Burst, because again, interactions with that. And you get Jade Ignition coming back again, still in the play as well. Again, you're trading out Brawler's Intensity. You don't take Ferociousness like you did in other builds. So really your flex points here are going to be Dual Threat, and then Fury of Xuen and Xuen's Bond, depending on which one you're looking at. And then, of course, Dragon Punch, you're still playing Revolving Wind off of that. So some small changes, but not big. And really, the changes are coming from right here, Energy Burst and Sequence Strikes. And that has a lot to do with tier set. It makes these talents way better because of the tier set. Again, Condo of the Celestials is going to be your best bet in Mythic Plus as well. Again, it's a burst AoE cooldown, so potential value. Now, on a 1.5 minute cooldown, it's a little bit of a weird cooldown when it comes to the timing of things, because you're running a 1.5 minutes. You can kind of combine with your Storm, Earth, and Fire, and then you run 1.5 minute here. So, like, in this case, it makes it so that all your cooldowns do line up really well. But with the where you kind of put Condo of the Celestials in your prio list, it makes it a little off-putting. If it were 2 minutes or 1 minute, it'd probably be a lot better just with the way the timing works out from a rotation standpoint. So, something to keep an eye on that front. But other than that, talent build pretty much stays mostly the same. Not a lot of flex points that you can go grab. Some people will take things like Ordered Elements and go grab Drinking Horn Cover. I don't think that does a lot, really. And with... where's it at? And with things like Crane Vortex and, Dance of Chi-Ji and Blackout Kick are going to have a much higher cost here, so, like, you're getting a lot more free spenders, so Drinking Horn Cover and Mythic Plus just starts to lose value. There is even some theory that you could move Transfer the Power out. I don't think there's value in that yet. So it's just something to play around with. This build is definitely gonna evolve as the season goes on, and as we get to playing more and more with higher gear and what your trinket setups and stuff like that are. So just a lot going on with it. All right, let's talk about your stats. So if you weren't paying attention in the beta or PTR cycle, Blizzard buffed mastery by like, I think it was 35% for Windwalker. This now makes it so that Windwalker is heavy haste mastery with crit and verse still being good options. So Windwalker's in a situation where if it's a high enough item level upgrade, and I say this all the time, if it's a high enough item level upgrade, it doesn't matter what stats are on it. But when you're comparing two pieces, say like you're comparing two 659 pieces, the one that has haste mastery is generally going to give you more value than the one that has crit verse or haste crit. That said, if you get like a tier piece or there's a trinket or a ring that's really good that is haste crit or haste verse, you're not upset with that, or gives crit or gives versatility or gives mastery. You're not upset with that. Like, Windwalker doesn't hate any of the four stats. Like, you're not trying to dodge them, but you just value haste and mastery a little bit more. Now, the one thing to be very, very mindful about is because of the way Windwalker mastery works, if you screw up your combo strikes, you're losing way more damage than you were in previous patches. So you got to be on top of your rotation in order not to lose your combo strikes. All right. Knowing that, let's talk about some gear. And like I said, we're going to mainly talk about it from a standpoint of weapons and trinkets. So let's start with weapons. So throughout Season 1, we were dual wielding because it was just better. Things like dual threat was just good. It was a very well-tuned talent. In Season 2, however, dual wield and two-handed are both viable. And it comes down really to weapon availability, the big reason why. Now, there are a couple of really powerful one-handed weapons. We got this one here, the Molten Knuckles, that has no secondary stats, but has a very strong cantrip proc and equip effect. Combined with Galliwitz's Iron Thumb off the last boss. Crit haste, not bad. And then again, you gain damage every time you contaminate a target. You gain more and more damage off of it. So the big thing that makes these two good, obviously, are these equip effects. It's perfectly free damage. The hardest part about them is that they are at the best item levels. Their mythic item track is off the last two bosses of the raid, and not everyone is going to have access to that. Which means that potentially a two-handed weapon that you can gain out of an earlier boss in the raid, slightly earlier boss in the raid, the one arm, the Gigabank Breaker is like fine. But this Haste Verse Shaft, the Grease Monkey Shift Stick, also a good option for a two-handed. Like, a lot of people can kill the first boss in Mythic. So, like, getting access to this versus getting access to these last two items just makes it so that it's really hard. And out of Mythic Plus, there's only really one good Mythic Plus item that makes it so that you want to go chase that. So dual wield just has more limited options. Whereas, like I said, you can get Vexy, you can get the shift stick off of... What was the other boss I'm looking at before I go to the dungeon one? The Bank Breaker, obviously, is like a pretty good one as well. Like, both of those are going to be fine weapons, the two that we talked about. Now, out of Mythic Plus, there's a really good staff out of Prior of the Sacred Flame. It's going to be in the rotation, and that is Glorious Defender's Poleaxe. Perfect stats, haste mastery that we want to go chase. So if you can get this on Myth Track out of your vaults, which a lot more people are doing 10s than are killing the last couple of bosses in Mythic Raid, this makes it so that you get this choice. Now, that said, out of Cinder Brew Meadery, there is a decent enough one hand that you can equip two of, and that is Crusher of the Unsettled. So this is also a decent little mace. Very basic Mog overall. And even this staff here, the Sticky Stirring Stick, not as good as the one out of Priory, but another one that's not bad. But again, very basic in its Mog look. So the availability of two-handed weapons, especially as you get higher into item levels, just starts to become a lot more valuable. And that's where a talent like Dual Threat starts to lose value, and why we're placing it over into things like Last Emperor's Capacitor. So early on, what it gives you more item level. If you gain a 650 You know, when we're talking like even at Mythic, say like here, 593 for season 1. For season 2, I think it's going to jump up to a much bigger number. But like, I think it's 6. I think it's 649. I think is the beginning number for zeros. I'll have to check. If you know, put it in the comments. So because of that, like early on, dual wield is still going to be perfectly fine. But if you're talking like min-maxing the best possible items, two-handed weapons are going to make a comeback. All right. One last thing. Let's talk about the circlet. It is going to be BIS for pretty much the majority of the season. Now, the only difference that you're going to do off of this is Thunderlords is going to be switched out for the Stormbringers rune, because now Mastery is good, and Fathom Dwellers is now good because of that. Gives Mastery. Let's unsocket this and put in, you know, every secondary stat. All the secondary stats are pretty decent for Windwalker now. Haste Mastery obviously the best, but Crit Burst still not bad. And then you get this random proc chance. Now, there are some people that will look into potentially playing Wind Singers, or the Singing Wind Citroon. You can do that, but with legendaries, like, you could potentially gain the value of Stormbringers or double dip into your Fathom Dwellers, which makes it really, really good. That said, like, you can play either one, play legendaries, or even potentially play Wind Singers, and you're not going to be like SOL. But I would say probably legendary overall. You'll have to sim it. All right. Trinkets. Let's go back to the trinket discussion real quick, because I didn't realize I didn't do that. There are 2 trinkets that are by far and away the 2 that you're going to be wanting to chase. They both come out of Liberation of Undermined. Number 1, first and foremost, Eye of Kazan, or Eye of Kezan. I don't know how you pronounce it. Mastery, obviously very good stat. We like that. Gains agility while you're in combat. Very, very good. The problem with this trinket, obviously, A, last boss. B, God and everybody are going to be going after this trinket. It is good for every spec. Windwalker likes it. Mistweaver likes it. Brewmaster likes it. So it's good for all 3 of your specs. But that means that Arms Warriors like it. It means that, like, I haven't looked at every single tank, but I know that, like, Feral's going to like this. Guardian's going to like this, because I've been digging into them. Evoker's going to like this. Mastery specs across the board are going to like it. And it changes based off your thing, so you can gain intellect. So if you have a spec that likes Mastery in any form or fashion, they're chasing this trinket. Now, they are going to put in the Puzzling Cartel coins, I think, the dinars, in the 0.5 patch. This will probably be a prime candidate to go get dinar if you don't get it off of, like, Heroic Galliwix, or if you're in a guild that gets CE, get the Mythic version. The other really good one is going to be the House of Cards, which comes off the One-Armed Bandit. So here, again, on-use trinket, agility, equip, big mastery for 15 seconds, and then you continue to stack the deck, which increases the minimum mastery on every further use. So, like, you're gaining potentially over 11,000 mastery with this. And because of how much we love mastery now, very powerful trinket. Now, a couple of other trinkets that you can go look at. Like, these 2 are just by far the best. You want to go chase them if you can. However, there are a couple of trinkets that are quite good that you can also go get. Not as good, but still quite good. We're going to start with the Signet of the Priory. So guarantee you a higher secondary stat that'll usually be haste or mastery, and then gives you the ability to give your allies that same stat. Again, very powerful. The best dungeon trinket that you're going to get. So again, if you can't get one of these trinkets off of the thing, out of these bosses, because they're bosses that you're not going to kill on Mythic or whatever, go grab and farm Signet of the Priory. You're going to spend a lot of time in Sacred Flame. This is a very, very good one. There is a Delve trinket that has a haste proc that you drink from, but it's awkward to use, but it technically is very good. But it does cap out at 655 item level. It's the Imperfect Ascendancy Serum. So you can go farm that out of Delves if you'd like. But other than that, I would go grab Rick Reverb out of Liberation of Undermine, which I believe, yep, right here. Reverb Radio, Gives you haste when you equip it, and then once you hit your max hype, you amp it up to 100% for 15 seconds before starting again. So very cool. It's a tailoring pattern. It's a very cool trinket there. And then there is the improved Sephorium one off of Kiza. That is out of Operation Floodgate, I believe. No, it's off Demolition Duo. Yeah. So this one here, again, while you have it equipped, you first ability every 60 seconds gives you a little bit more crit. Again, really strong. Another good solid dungeon trinket, so that if you are not able to acquire one of these raid trinkets, this is another good secondary trinket to go grab for yourself. Every other trinket beyond that's really not worth chasing. All right, let's talk about enchants and consumables before we go dive into the quick version of the rotation. So, Windwalker enchants haven't really changed. Authority of the Depths is still going to be your best for your main hand or for your two-handed weapon. If you're dual-wielding, Authority of Radiant Power for your offhand is still going to be best. That hasn't changed. Crystalline Radiance is still your best chest enchant. For wrist and cloak, pick one. Technically, you want to be min-maxy. Avoidance is going to be the best. But if you want to grab speed or leech for whatever reason, because maybe like me, I share this cloak with my Mistweaver set, so I just put leech on it. You can do that. No harm, no foul. It's tertiary. It's their overall not super impactful, but any little bit that you can give yourself helps. Boots is still Defender's March. Rings, you're going to want to do haste if you're doing Radiant. If you want to do the Cursed Enchants, I don't recommend doing so because you kind of like all the stats. Cursed Haste is technically going to be your best one, but you do lose versatility, which means that like you're not really in a position to like lose that stat. So I would just go with the Radiant version and lose a little bit of haste off the top. On the leg enchant, let's talk about this real quick because I'm a leather worker. I have access to both these patterns. So for min-max or the highest level purposes, you're going to want to do the Stormbound Armor Kit, which at rank 3 gives you 930 agility and 895 stamina. Now, as I mentioned in the other two videos, if you watch the other two guides, if you play all three specs, now obviously Mistweaver's an intellect stat versus agility for Windwalker and Brewmaster. If you only have one pair of good legs because you're working on trying to gear up and get your second set of gear going, this charged armor kit that was introduced in this patch is actually not a bad secondary option. Now, it's not as much primary stat. It's 837 versus the 930 something, so you're losing about 100 primary stat. And you don't gain as much stamina. It's 805 versus 890. But it's going to act as a really strong cover all three specs option without having to constantly re-enchant your legs in order to min-max for Mistweaver versus your agility sets. And this kind of goes for any spec that has multiple primary stats. So Paladin, Druid, Shaman, yeah, all of those have like an agility and an intellect or strength and an intellect. So this is one that you want to keep in mind. I wouldn't make it like the thing that you use all season. If you are a one trick or only play Windwalker, use the Stormbound Armor Kit. But if you're like me and you play all three specs and you have only one pair of high item level pants right now because it's early in the season, this Charged Armor Kit is going to have a lot more value than I think people give it credit for. Other consumables, Alchemical Chaos is still going to be your best flask. That hasn't changed. Tempered Potions and Algari Healing Potions you want to keep on hand for more power and healing. Algari Mana Oils, because haste crit. Yes, really. These are still the best. Whetstones have some value, but I don't think they're as good as the potential in the stat increases that you're getting from the Mana Oil. Food, Belladar's Bounty, or of course your feasts. Culminating Blasphemite is going to be your like primary stat gem that you want. Now I have do I have that one here? Yeah, so I have that in my Adrenal Surge clasp right now. And then for all your other ones, you're going to want the Versatile Emerald, which is going to be high haste and versatility, but you can also grab the Haste Mastery gems now as well. Those also have some extra value in place. All right, so let's talk about rotation. So I'm going to come down here real quick. We're just going to drop onto this target dummy. Now, from an opener standpoint, when you're playing Conduit of the Celestials, you actually are not going to really use Conduit at all. I'll keep this up just because that's a spell name. I'm going to take this slow, so this is not going to be peak gameplay. So when you come in, the first thing that you're going to want to do, you start every fight with 2 chi, is you're going to want to, Tiger Palm, so that you gain this, and then Rising Sun Kick, Tiger Palm to get back up here, and then you want to invoke Xuen. Oh wait, am I in the wrong build? I am. Hang on a second. This would be for Raid Opener. Mythic Plus Opener, it's a little bit different. Go away, Xuen. Cool. Alright, let's go to Raid here. So in Raid, obviously I'm not going to have Xuen, so for 59 more seconds, that's my fault. But you're going to want to Tiger Palm, Rising Sun Kick, Tiger Palm to get back to 4 chi, Xuen to reset the cooldown, or to get it out, and then you want to reset with this, with Storm, Earth, and Fire, Strike of the Windlord, Tiger Palm, Fist of Fury to get the ball rolling on that, and then you Rising Sun Kick, and then do that. Now, if you're playing at full speed, you won't have that Rising Sun Kick come up before you Dragon Punch, and then go from there. Now, in terms of beyond that, Strike of the Windlord is going to be your highest value, chi spender, so you always want to use it when it's up, and then Rising Sun Kick, then Blackout Kick, and then Fist of Fury to stack it up with Transfer the Power. Once you get out of that opener, where you Whirling Dragon Punch, once you do your Whirling Dragon Punch, that's when you're going to want to Conduit of the Celestials, if you're maximizing like single target damage. Now, there are going to be cases where holding Conduit of the Celestials is going to be valuable for when ads come out, but it all depends on fight timing. So get into the fight, figure it out. Other than that, that's kind of the main source of it all. Like, that's the big opener. Beyond that, like, keep in mind that really, outside of the opener, use your procs when you get them. You can see here I got both procs from here. So really, you just want to make sure that you're, like I said, you're utilizing your procs. Move that a button over. We gotta fix that. But you can see here, like, you just mainly want to keep stuff on cooldown. And that's the big thing about playing Windwalker Monk. And then when you get 10 stacks of Transfer the Power, you want to try to use Fist of Fury as fast as you can so that you don't waste the stacks that you would gain from using things like Rising Sun Kick and Blackout Kick, etc. So overall, Windwalker Monk, I think it's going to be in a really good spot. I think it's being sneakily undervalued. I mentioned that Mistweaver Monk basically was the real kind of blockade in the Is It Meta video that I posted a few days, like last week at this point. But I still think that Windwalker Monk potentially can find a place if you don't have a dedicated Mistweaver Monk in your team and you're the Windwalker. I think Windwalker's looking good. We'll have to see how it ultimately plays out. Damage profile of the raid, it's going to be weird. Mythic Plus, it's kind of a weird situation with Mythic Plus comps. People trying to figure out what's going to be good. I think Mistweaver Monk, or Windwalker Monk rather, sneakily is going to be way better than people give it credit for, as it generally is, because it's not a highly played spec. So, but if you have any questions or you have any additional comments that you want to make, please put them in the comment section below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to this video. Send it to your friends that might be interested in playing Windwalker Monk. Druid is coming up next for those of you that are interested in learning a little bit about my 2 favorite Druid specs, so look for that coming on the horizon. Until then, stay safe, have fun, keep on playing great games, have fun and WoW, and I'll see you in the next video.